Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barry Louise Switson, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. There was a time that you would start a job and you would be there until you retired. But life has changed. And, with the internet and with people traveling more, people are not staying stagnant like they once were. And with me today is Marya Triandafellos, who's going to share how to transition, find a new career, find your passion in life. And I would like to welcome Marya. Marya, welcome.
Thank you, Barry. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You and I go back to the beginning of time.
Yes, we do.
And you've had many career changes yourself. Why don't you just give us a brief history of where you've been and bring us up to date on your latest?
Well, one thing is interesting is just about telling your career story. That's something I talk about in the book. Not only does it let you kind of reflect and assess what you've done in the past, but helps you move forward and figure out what you want to do in the future. So you're right, I've had a very varied career, kind of around a lot of the same things. I started off in art school and I studied fine art and design and also psychology. And that brought me into a career of design. So I started working freelance when I got out of school. I worked for the insurance conglomerate AIG, and I started up a small in-house department for them. And then after I left, I started my own business. I had a small design boutique for many years and about 20 people or so, and worked with small businesses, medium businesses, large corporations. And around that time, I think that's when I got into doing some video, and that's how I met you here at MNN. And it was really great experience there, doing some documentary work, also some long-form documentaries. And then about 10 years after I graduated with my bachelor's, I got into my Master of Arts at NYU, and that was an interesting program where I was kind of converting information I would get from sociology and psychology classes into a visual or fine art response. So a lot of the classmates were very jealous of me as they were studying for their tests and their term papers. I was doing collages and photography and all of that stuff. But that was like a really great training ground for me too. And then sort of the internet came along, and I really had love at first sight watching my first JPEG download. It was just like totally exciting, and I was working in publishing at the time with my own business, and just really fell in love with that. And being a kind of a forerunner there, I got some clients in financial services. One of them was American Express. And after doing some freelance, there was an opportunity there to build an in-house digital team for them for the creative work, working on the website and apps and other stuff. So I did that for 5 years, and after that I started a consulting business because I got a little less interested in design per se, but more interested in the things around design, like running teams, how to, leadership issues, managing people. It became a little bit more interesting and exciting. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm working with Marriott Hotels. And I wrote this book, kind of started out as more of a memoir-y thing, but just bringing my knowledge from hiring a lot of people, working literally with hundreds of different companies, and tried to accumulate all that in one book.
You wrote the book, Career X. Sounds like you've had quite an eclectic background, but basically you've stayed in the same arena, you could say.
Yes.
How did you know how to switch, or what attributes that you needed to go from one area to another, or was it an easy transition?
For me, it was always, I tried to always have whatever I was passionate and interested about drive what I did next. So I for example, with the internet, as soon as that came out, I read a book on how to create a website in a week. And I did, and it was fun. But I realized, well, I don't really like coding. But it was a great way to test the waters and see, okay, where I like this whole concept, this internet thing, where will I land in it? And I think everyone kind of learns about themselves in different ways. Me, I actually like to try things and experiment with things and see where it goes from there. Some people, prefer to take a lot of classes and spend a lot of time in school. I did that too, but everyone kind of finds their own ways of learning what's next for them.
All right, with your book, Career X, what would make somebody pick this book up versus another book on the shelf?
Well, what makes it unique in the career book genre, and there are certainly tons of them, is there are two main things. One is the type of content that is in there, and the other is the format. So what I did was break it into 120 questions or FAQs. So if someone is really just looking for the answer to a specific question they have, they can just jump to the question in the table of contents in the beginning and find the answer. They don't have to read the book cover to cover. You can, of course, do that too if you're kind of starting out and you want to know everything. And the other thing is really just giving this full picture of what your career is and to own your career and plan it. So not leave things up for other people, whether that's family or your employers or anybody else.
Would you say this is mainly for college students? Would you say it's also good for the outsourced, the retiree who wants to get back in, or just somebody who's tired of what they're doing and want to move on?
Exactly. So it's at those kind of pivotal moments, those major life-changing moments where a book like this is good, because it's when you come out of school, where do I go? What do I do? You need a little helping hand. When you come back into the workforce after a long break, what are the best practices now? How do I know what that information is? Or if you're in a job and you find yourself bored and uninterested and yearning for something else, it's good to stay there until you figure out what to do next. But, read a book like Career X to try to stimulate you to figure out what to do.
Can you give us some examples of contents of the book?
Yeah, so the book is broken into 4 main sections. So it's about your career. What is a career? And that section talks about definitions. It gives some examples of career stories like the one I gave you about my career. It also talks about how do I cultivate my career? So how do I nurture it from a little seed when I start into a lovely, beautiful plant or even a forest? And that includes, that's about 4 sections. Self-awareness, which combines a lot of things like what behavioral traits you have, what's your personality type, what's your appearance like, all the things about you, how you know about yourself, and how you care about yourself. So sleeping right, I know it seems obvious, but there's a lot of talk about sleep these days, and that is important. Sleeping right, just taking care of yourself, understanding how the body works, how your mind works, and really having the self-awareness that what is right for you, knowing your traits and your personality. Then also part of the cultivation section is developing your own personal brand, your professional brand.
All right. How do you develop your own personal brand, and how would one define your personal brand?
So your personal brand, so the whole idea of professional branding came about from what has happened for branding for products and companies. So it's sort of taking something that's been used in industry and applying it to individuals. So the same basic principles apply. So you're trying to first understand what is really unique about me. If there's a lineup of candidates waiting for the same job or applying for the same job, what makes me unique? How am I going to stand out? And that can be a lot of different things. It could be just the combination of things. For example, for me, I'm an artist that also, or a creative person that has a business sense. So there's not too many of us out there. It's getting better now. There's more of them now.
Very true. Very true.
But, so that's something unique about me, and that's part of my brand. So you want to be able to examine yourself, and a good little test for that, or a good way to try to start understanding your professional brand, is to pick 3 keywords that describe yourself. And that's a really good way to start understanding your essence.
What would you say is the job search cycle these days? Because with the internet, it plays a whole different ball game than when I was starting out in the business world.
So in the book I cover, in the beginning of the book, I talk more about that, things are different now. Several years, maybe 20 years ago or so, the idea was you got a job and you stayed with that company for the life of your career. But it's really nothing like that today. The average person will have 3 career changes and, go through probably having different employment types. So you might be a full-time worker, you might be a part-time worker, you might be a gig worker. A gig worker is someone who finds their work off of like a job marketplace type of site. You might be a freelancer, you might have your own business. So everything is in the mix these days. It's very different than when it, many years ago. But when I'm talking about the job life cycle in the book, I'm talking about the job life cycle for like a full-time job. So I think a lot of people got sort of lulled into complacency with the having online, the ability to apply for a job online, because it's like, oh, I'll just see what's on Indeed.com, and whatever's there, I'll just apply to it, and then just wait back and see who calls me. But it's really not the way to get a job. Only 37% of jobs are done through that means, through the web, like just randomly picking jobs. So most of it's through word of mouth, and you have to do a lot of work to build your personal and your professional network, to build relationships, and to look to the companies that you want to work for. Those are like really important things to do.
Nothing's really changed, because it's always been word of mouth, and it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Exactly.
To get what you want. And you touched on the fact that you've got both a creative mind and a business mind, which is so rare, because the creatives usually don't understand business, and it's like 2 ships passing in the night. What is the difference between a gig worker and a freelancer?
That's a good question, Barry, because some people say it's the same thing. I think there's a distinction. So a gig worker, how I would explain it, is someone who finds a gig or like a one-off project or term of employment from one of these job marketplaces. So there's a lot of those. One is called, for example, Upwork. So you can sign up on Upwork. You have a profile similar to like a social media site. And then people are looking for, let's say, a writer or an editor or a marketer, someone who's good on social media, whatever. And they'll find you. They post the job or project request, and then they'll ask you to respond to it. So that's a gig worker, where a freelancer is almost akin to like a little micro small business owner, because as a freelancer, you have to do everything. You don't have that marketplace to drive, leads to you. You have to go out on your own and find that.
What inspired you to write the book? I mean, this is so different from what you do.
Yes, I did cry writing the book, I have to admit. But it's really, what happened was, some of my friends had college-age students, and they would send them my way and say, hey, can you help them out? They just graduated, help them with their, getting their first job or whatever. And I was just stunned at thinking like, okay, we're in a more modern age. We have the internet. We have a lot more information out there. It's much easier to find out information about companies. But the kids that would come to me were very confused about what to do when they graduated. And I felt like, gosh, they're paying so much more money. Shouldn't this be part of all of that too? But it doesn't seem to be. It doesn't seem that that gap between moving from a student to a professional has been well served. So that's what I started out really wanting to try to fill that gap, but it kind of got a little bigger than I thought. 300 pages worth.
Are there any controversial topics in the book?
Yeah, there are some questions in the book that FAQs that are not usually covered in this type of book. For example, I think the current really crisis in student debt. I can't write a book like this without mentioning that the student debt is at $1.3 trillion and continues to grow. Last year it was 1.2. This year is 1.3, meaning 2017. It's just horrible, unconscionable to me to have our youth come into the world with a huge amount of debt. So I talk about how to evaluate if college is right for you, and how to really think of it as a purchase, not just, oh, I want to go to this school and because of the marketing that school has done or whatever. Just really look at it as a purchase and a product, and understand what am I paying for, and what is this going to give me in the end. And there's actually a formula for that. I can't repeat it. I couldn't do it off the top of my head, but there is an economist who came up with an actual formula where you can calculate, am I going to get the money that I paid for this college back in terms of getting a better job? So it's one thing that students really should think about.
I think that's an excellent idea, because there are great colleges that are city schools that can give you the same education, but it goes back to the prestige of going to the better school, et cetera, and you can't afford it and you're in debt for the rest of your life. What exactly do you define networking as, and how does networking work?
There's, I guess, kind of a couple components there. So you have your network, which is all of the colleagues that you know, all the business associates that you have. And networking is the act of meeting new potential people for your network. And it might seem a bit daunting, and a lot of people get very nervous about the idea of networking, and they feel shy about it. They don't know where to start or begin, or they feel awkward being in a room of people they don't know. But or even talking about themselves, feeling like it's bragging or something like that. But really, I try to have people, if possible, have the mindset that first of all, you're going to have fun, because if you don't have fun, it's going to show, and no one's going to want to talk to you. So think of it, any kind of networking event, as a big party. And in terms of bragging or showing off or whatever, talking about yourself, you have something great to offer. So be positive and share that with somebody. So you are going to give something good to somebody, they are going to give something good to you as well. And you build these relationships over time. Nothing happens overnight. But you want to just like somebody, because when it comes down to it, if somebody's got to hire someone on their team, the first thing they do is, if they know someone, it's going to be someone they like, because you spend 8 hours a day with someone, you want to like them. And then they go out to the next circle, on their team. They'll ask their friends, they'll ask their network, hey, do you know anybody for this job? That's how all of that works. So the idea is to really build up your network of people that you like, who you feel you have a connection with, and you can build this reciprocal relationship over time.
Very interesting. A young lady I know moved into this city and she didn't have a job. What a surprise. I mean, she does have a work history, but she wanted to move into New York. So I extended myself within my network to see about getting her a job. I gave the resume to somebody, they gave it to somebody else in her ideal job search. When she found a job on by herself, which was great, she never said thank you to me.
Oh my.
Nor did she say thank you to the person who I gave the resume to, who extended himself to give it to somebody else. And you know what? The bottom line is, I will not lift a finger to do anything for this person again.
No, of
Ever.
course not. That's just very, I'm glad you brought that up too, because it is reciprocal, and you have to be respectful and responsible about your behavior and other people's time. There was no obligation for you to do that, and that's just, it's a bad lesson.
It's rude.
Yeah, and what this person did too is she cut off like maybe a world of other possibilities, just because that particular opportunity that you offered her out of the kindness of your heart didn't turn out into something. Doesn't mean that there wouldn't have been a future where something could have happened, but she just, cut off all of those opportunities, and we really can't risk that today. None of us can really afford to, turn our cheek to any kind of help, because we all need help as we go through all this.
Is it advantageous to work with a recruiter?
Good question. I think it's in most industries, it definitely is advantageous to work with a recruiter. And like the same idea I was talking about with your network and getting people that you like and have a connection with, you should feel the same way about a recruiter. Get references from your friends in the same industry as you, and say, hey, what recruiters have you used? Who's done good by you? Check out maybe some references they have on their LinkedIn page. And the benefit of those recruiters is they know a little bit more in depth about that particular industry. They know who's hiring. They know how to be your liaison into the company. They might tell you information about the current state of the department that you're going in. They might have other insight about what the future of that department is, so they can kind of prep you for when you go into an actual interview. So they can definitely be valuable, but I would just say caution, do your homework on your recruiters.
What do you think about using social media to find a job, like LinkedIn, or even, you might say Facebook, because it's a networking, I call it a therapy session on Facebook. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah, LinkedIn is really the place to this social network for finding a job. It's all about business. Your profile's already up there. Make sure you have all the information that's required on your LinkedIn profile. Job postings are abound on LinkedIn. You can go on there and search company pages and understand more about what a company is like. And you can also network through your network to find out if you know people and if there's a job opening. So if you see a job opening, you want to be able to talk to people who work there to get a better idea of the situation around the job. Is it a new role? Did 5 people just work there and quit? So LinkedIn kind of gives you that quick access to all that kind of information that you need. And you can find out, even if you don't know someone on your first degree, so to speak, they might know someone who works at the place. And you kind of want to be able to have those informational meetings before you go into having an interview with the company.
If a college student is deep into their curriculum and they decide partway through, all the way through, it's not for them, is there anything that you would suggest they do?
I guess it really depends on the circumstances, but the things that you want to consider are how far away from are these two curriculums? Is it still an MBA, but one is finance and one is marketing? In that case, maybe just stick with it to the end. Again, it depends how far along you are too. Because when you come out, I think it's only like 25% of people get a job in what their degree is. So it's not so strange to graduate with a degree and then get a job in something else. But and it also could be a cost thing. You might have to spend more money if you're, let's say, in your third year and you realize you don't like what you're doing and you have to maybe take 2 more years of college. Do you have the funds for that? So it's those are the things to try to think about. You know, do you where are you in the path? How different are those 2 careers that you were thinking about, and do you have the funds and the time to make the switch?
Where do you think the jobs are going these days? I mean, are you doing remote? You doing home? You doing traveling and doing it?
Well, in terms of locations for jobs, that a lot of companies, believe it or not, they kind of played around with having people work from home, but a lot of them still want you to actually work on premises. But one thing is interesting is the future of jobs in general. A kind of scary statistic, 50% of all jobs today could today be automated with today's technology. That's not sometime in the future figuring out the technology, but 50% of the jobs could be automated today.
That's
so
frightening.
yeah, so think about what is most human, like what are the jobs that are most human that would be difficult to replace, and those are things that really involve like critical thinking, adapting quickly to changing circumstances, those sorts of things, because it's a path that we're heading towards. So I think it's 63% of the today's kids, like young kids, are going to have jobs that don't even exist today, that we don't even know what they are. So we're looking at a really significant change in the whole workforce in the coming years.
Now, being your first job, would you still negotiate your contract?
Well, it really depends. Right now, so many corporate jobs are very regimented, so they might have a little bit of a range or a leeway for a job, but if you find a job and the salary seems reasonable to you, all of the benefits that you have seem reasonable, then if it's good for you, don't feel like you're obligated to.
You said that a lot of the students come out of college and they're like lost because they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you plan on holding seminars to help students or college graduates? Career X is a good book, but a lot of people are more visual.
Yes. I'm really working on what to do next, but one thing I know for sure is definitely getting onto the campuses, starting out locally in New York and being able to speak to the students there. I've done a little bit of that so far, and I think it's really great to be in front of the students and have them ask questions, from their current positions. It's great to read that, but there's always more questions to be asked. So I've presented in a couple of classes, and we're going to look to do that in the fall, even a couple of things during the summer. Looking to talk to on campus, the students have a lot of clubs and groups, so go through the clubs and groups where they're talking about career opportunities or trying to understand this maze of things. So that's definitely a next step for me.
Getting a book published is traumatic, and it's like you get rejection after rejection. Did you have a difficult time finding your publisher?
So that was interesting because I had the idea of writing a book, not this book, but a book at some point. And a business colleague of mine got in touch and said, look, I have this business book publishing company, and I'm looking to, get authors for it. So it is in the realm of self-publishing as opposed to a publisher that you would request, being published for. But it's a really great hybrid because it gives you the support you need, and the only thing that you don't get from this kind of hybrid relationship is like a massive distribution, but that doesn't really guarantee you anything today anyway. The author now, even if I was like with Macmillan or whatever company, the author is responsible for marketing and getting the word out. So this was really a great solution for me anyway, to be able to control that, have a low initial amount of searching and looking, kind of zero in my case, and not spending all the time trying to find a publisher, and just being able to spend all that time writing.
In the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Well, this book is really done with love, and my goal with it really is to have people spend their life doing something that they love and something they're passionate about, because I really do believe that everyone has something or many things that they can contribute to the world and make this a better place. I know it's a little la-la, but so really just if whatever it takes, really take the time to know yourself and to understand what you're unique at and what you're good at, and be able to spread that around.
Thank you so much, Marya, for joining me. And I hope you've learned something about your present, past, and future job search and how you can benefit and what you need to know. If you have any questions, write us here at the Women's Connection. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.